I know it's annoying when James is off, and I know it's annoying when you have someone like me sat in instead, moaning on about how terrible Brexit will be. Well, actually, that's not the case, because I am trying desperately over the last week or two to be a bit more positive about Brexit, to try and see the benefits, try and sort of work my way through this 3 years of hell we've been in, and that now we have a Prime Minister and administration that at least on paper believe in Brexit, that perhaps actually we could be feeling a bit more
positive. And you will feel positive.
And we might
you will do. Don't worry, it'll come.
And of course we've got the £2 billion today that was announced for no deal planning. But as someone who looks on and tries to think of reasons to be positive, I cannot be when it comes to £2 billion being set aside.
Well, hold on. We save $37 billion if we do the no deal. So
we don't actually. That's not.
We don't pay it. We don't pay the money.
We still have to pay about $20 billion of it that we're already committed to.
We're still $17 billion.
Also, I don't believe that we would turn around and say. Well, I think it was 39 as well. But I think we were too. So there you go.
Even better than $2 billion now.
It's the $3 billion. Yeah. But no, I don't believe that we would ever turn around and not pay that.
Well, if they won't do a deal, why shouldn't we? If they're going to stop us. I mean, they're not doing it. They're doing it for their own good.
Well, no, they're just protecting their own.
Well, they need to protect their own.
Well, they do.
They should let us. If someone wants to leave democratically, legally, they should let them leave.
They're doing the very thing that we've accused them of not doing over the last 5 years, and that is protecting us, looking after us, and looking after the interests of their members. That's precisely
we don't need them to look after us. We just want to do a free trade deal. We'll deal with our own laws. And why do they want to suck us into their own legal and empire?
Unfortunately, the layout of our country means that we have a land border in between two countries, one of which will be in the EU, one of which will not be. And I don't know how that can work, because the other countries in Europe that have that have got regulatory alignment and have got treaties with the European Union.
We've got to work it out. There's great minds that can work this.
I'm sure, but 3 years they've had.
Yeah, well, they've been fudging it. They've been trying to remain. They've been Remainers for 3 years.
Even the Brexiters haven't got an answer to the Irish border. No,
they haven't they? Rees-Mogg, he's got an answer.
Well,
John Redwood, he'll have an answer. He's got an answer.
Well, where has it been for the last 3.5 years?
He's come on and said it. He's come on and said it.
Well, let's now speak to Ben Harris Quinney, who's the chairman of the Bow Group, which is a Conservative Party policy think tank. Evening to you, Ben.
Evening.
How do you think this £2 billion will solve problems, if indeed it's meant to, like the Irish border and the other issues that, really basic logical issues that Brexit brings up?
Yeah, I don't think the £2 billion is specifically targeted at the Irish border. That's a separate problem.
Of an issue that Brexit brings up. In what way will this £2 billion help?
Well, the £2 billion. The important thing about it is that it's being made available now. So you've got 100 million of it that's going to be spent on an advertising campaign, and it's going to be spent on preparing for a no-deal scenario, which I would argue Theresa May's government did nowhere near enough of. I think a no-deal is the most likely outcome. It's not definite, but the monies are going to be used to prepare for that and to try and eliminate some of the uncertainty, and to soften the blow for a lot of businesses that are concerned about no deal. So it's what might be described as a managed no deal. But in terms of the 37 billion, the previous governments have committed to EU schemes to spend that amount of money. But if we leave with a no deal, we're under no obligation. There's no way that they could enforce us to pay that money. So what a lot of no deal
Some of it has been handed over already, though, from what I understand.
Yeah, about 3 billion has gone already because of the amount of time that's elapsed. But what no deal advocates say is that we will have that 37 billion to spend at the stroke of no deal, to ease the passage. And the other important thing to remember about no deal is,
can you explain though, Ben, how have we gone from trying to give people the opportunity to vote for, and I quote, the easiest trade deal in history for the European Union, that they would be, queuing up to do a trade deal with us? How have we gone from people voting for that on the basis of leaving to £2 billion to soften the blow and to give us medical supplies and to give us a way in which we can essentially survive after no deal. That was not mentioned during the referendum, and I would go so far as to say that anyone who voted leave did so based on the promises that it would be a very easy thing to manage. This isn't easy. This is almost wartime stuff. Well,
actually, you've said it yourself just a few minutes ago. I think almost every Brexiteer was in agreement that when Brexit occurred, David Cameron stepped down on the basis that he'd supported Remain, and the idea was we're going to get a Brexit-supporting government with a Brexit-supporting Prime Minister who believes in Brexit and is going to go to the EU with that vision and negotiate on that basis. Now, we've only just got Boris Johnson in post, who was actually in two minds about Brexit. If you remember, he famously wrote 2 articles, one for Remain, one for Brexit. But he's about as close as we're going to get to a Brexiteer as Prime Minister. But he's only just gone into post, and 3 years has been wasted on Theresa May's deal, which had no chance of gaining support in either quarter of Brexit or Remain. So that's why we've got to this point that 3 years have been wasted, which should have been spent with Brexiteers in government putting forward their vision.
But David Davis was a Brexiteer, and he was Brexit Secretary. Dominic Raab was a Brexiteer, he was Brexit.
They were, and as they said, they were completely shut out of the decision-making process.
Right. So Theresa May, the most uncharismatic Prime Minister who lost her majority, who all we've heard about from the last 3 years is those people saying that she's got no power, no authority or anything. She had so much power during that time that those ardent Brexiters who were in the positions in Cabinet had no control over what was happening.
That's correct. I mean, Theresa May is a control freak, so even though she may not have... even though she may not have had a base of political support in the country, she was Prime Minister and she was able to cut out key ministers from decision-making processes.
Do you think that they could have done differently that Theresa May didn't? Because surely, love or loathe Theresa May, and I agree she was not the most charismatic woman and didn't make the best judgments at times, but she would have been desperate to have got Brexit signed up, done, sealed, delivered, so that actually we could get on and talk about other things.
Yeah, but I think the
formula that these people have that Theresa May didn't.
The problem is that Theresa May didn't believe in Brexit, she didn't understand the ideology behind it, and she didn't understand the base that supported it.
What can they do that she can't then? What are they going to be able to offer to get a deal that she can't, when the EU haven't changed their position one iota in over 3 years? What will Boris and the others be able to do that Theresa May can't?
Well, I think what they have off the bat is the support of the Brexit movement, the Brexit constituency. Margaret Thatcher used to say, never stand in the middle of the road in politics because you get hit by traffic from both sides. And what Boris is doing is he's going to a core vote strategy and branding himself as a Brexiteer, a man for the Brexiteers, and so he's uniting that quadrant of political support.
So I can see the benefits of that and how that will resolve the internal wranglings of the Conservative Party that me, as a Conservative voter, for the last 30 years have been pig sick of. This was what brought down Thatcher. This has been an internal Conservative...
Brought down every Prime Minister since Thatcher as well.
So, brilliant. This will sort out the internal Conservative Party wranglings, but what is that going to do for a deal with the EU and the EU's position?
Well, because I think if the Conservative Party, because of the shock results of recent years, both in and out of Parliament, the rise of the Brexit Party, these sorts of things, I think almost everyone in the Parliamentary Conservative Party has acknowledged the fact that if they carry on May's strategy, or if they carry on pushing a Remain strategy, they are going to doom themselves to political oblivion. So the what politicians recognise beyond everything else is the desire to save their own skin. They want to stay in Parliament, the vast majority of them. So they want to win the next election, and they see Boris as the person who can deliver that for them, whereas Theresa May would have ensured defeat. So that is a huge power base for Boris to then say to them, well, look, you've got to support me. And I think Boris will have a much easier job of getting votes through the Conservative Party than Theresa May did. That doesn't mean he'll have an easy job. It just means that, he will be a more uniting factor than I think Theresa May was. So he has...
And I agree with that, by the way. I actually agree that it's a really good idea and it's really brilliant that at last the very people who would probably oppose Boris Johnson will be at the table in Cabinet making decisions with him. So I get the logic of what you're saying. I don't, though, I fail to yet see how all of that support and all of those extra voices in Cabinet that are pro-Brexit, how staving off the threat of the Brexit Party, I fail to see how any of that and all of that positivity is going to change the EU's position, because we've got no deal on
it's quite clear, because Theresa May had two problems. One, she didn't have agreement in Brussels, and two, she didn't have agreement in Westminster. So she couldn't go to Brussels and say, look, this is what the British Parliament wants.
Neither does Boris Johnson. He's only got a majority of two, and just because he's got a Brexit cabinet doesn't mean he'll get it through Parliament.
It doesn't mean that, as I said, it's going to be a tough job, but I think he'll have an easier job than Theresa May. Theresa May's problem was, it's not that she couldn't get support for her deal, she couldn't get support for anything. Parliament would not put forward a clear view on any issue. There wasn't a majority for anything. So if Boris can get to the point where there is a majority, even if it's only by 2 seats or 1 seat, if he can get that point through and say, well, look, the British people have voted, and this is what the British Parliament is now saying, that gives him a far stronger hand in Brussels. Now, they can turn him away, and this is why he's preparing for a No Deal Brexit. But it's a much stronger hand than going to Brussels and saying, well, I might not actually be able to deliver any of this because Parliament's not with me, and my party's not even with me.
It's just disappointing, I think, that 3 and a bit years on, we're still dealing in hypotheticals and how positive it should be and how, yes, fingers crossed, the numbers will line up, and yes, we've got Brexit people in charge, so let's hope that it'll all work out and that Boris can go and say these things to Brussels. There's nothing firm here, there's no facts, there's nothing that weeks away from us leaving on October.
I hate to say I told you so, but I think actually most people in the country are in agreement on this, whether you are Brexit or Remain. I'm a Brexiteer, and I think the last 3.5 years have been a tragic waste. I mean, disappointed is not the word. This country could not afford to wait around because Theresa May wanted to be stubborn. 3.5 years have been wasted, and that is, a tragedy.
Well, what a shame that those people like Boris Johnson, who were these ardent Brexiters, withdrew from the race all those 3 years in the back, ago. Didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, Boris is
Conservative Party wrangle, which we're all suffering for.
But the Brexiteers that I have the greatest confidence in, you mentioned, people like John Redwood. These people have been Brexiteers for 30 years. 30, 40 years. Boris Johnson is someone who, was keeping his powder dry, wanted to see the way things are going. And I think, Boris Johnson as London Mayor is a very different beast to the Boris Johnson that's just run before the Tory membership. And I think there are a lot of questions you can ask about the changing of his positions on things. So I'm...
I don't see how we can now be relying on someone to put our national interest first when that very person put his personal interest first and stood back 3 years ago. He's put his personal interest before anything else in his career, Boris Johnson, and now we have to rely on this person to put the interest.
But his personal interest is now tied up with the country.
Yes, it is, and I think he has realised, whatever the motivations behind it, he has realised that if he doesn't deliver Brexit, it'll be the end of his political career, and it'll be the end of the Conservative Party, probably. So I think that's how he is motivated. No, I don't think it'll be the end of the UK. I mean, there's a lot of hyperbole.
We will be even more divided. We will have made a fool of ourselves to the EU. And again, I am still, as someone who is trying to be positive about this, 3 years on, I still cannot understand why on earth we are going through this complete and utter just pointlessness when we never had that bad a relationship with the EU to start with. Yes, I might be a Ramona, but I don't believe that this is what people now, 3 and a bit years on, exactly what everyone on the Remain side said 3 years ago was that it would be chaos, that the Irish border would be unsolvable, and that we would end up in stalemate. And that's precisely what...
Well, yes, but all the things that we said have come true as well, and that's because we didn't have a Brexiteer or a Remainer. We had this willy-wally compromise candidate for 3.5 years, and no one wanted that.
Well, again, perhaps the Conservative Party shouldn't have voted in Theresa May, but it was their decision. I cannot help, and again,
it wasn't their decision, actually. There was no vote.
Well, there was no vote because she was essentially unopposed, because no one else had the balls to stand up and try and lead us through.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are endless problems with the Conservative Party that we can wax lyrical about, but the average Brexit voter doesn't really care about the Conservative Party. They can have voted Brexit with good conscience and not extended that to say, but I hope the Conservative Party are going to do the right thing. Many of them were very anti the Conservative Party. You got a lot of Brexit Party voters, a lot of UKIP voters, a lot of people that never voted before. And the simplicity of what they put forward is very clear, and that's why it's frustrating that Parliament, the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, Westminster, you name it, hasn't got that through their skulls, is that they want to leave the European Union.
You've just summed it up there, because it's the simplicity of what was put forward by everyone, but it is not a simple process. We're taking what is 40 years or so of extremely complicated trading arrangements, and the layout and way in which the UK is formed based on our EU membership and, of course, our relationship with Northern Ireland. And we've taken all of that and we've said to people, especially who voted to leave, it's a really easy binary choice, in or out. It isn't an easy binary choice. It isn't something that can just be achieved very quickly. And I really think that it has cheapened and invalidated the debate to make it just about in or out.
Yeah, but the real problem has not been that. The real problem has been that you had this vote by the British public, and you had effectively manifestos put forward by either side. But at the conclusion of that, the manifesto didn't come into government. So you had a Prime Minister who was Remain, you had a Cabinet who was 70% Remain, you had a Parliament that was 70% Remain. And what has happened over the last 3.5 years is obfuscation of that vote, of that decision to leave. And you've got all sorts of different colours of it: people's vote, ignore the vote, remain in the customs union, remain in the single market. What we saw in the European elections with the great victory of the Brexit Party was really people saying, why haven't you done what we told you to do? And that's what should have happened. And if that is to be a no deal, I think it's important that that happens to restore the democratic legitimacy of the United Kingdom. And then we'll go forward and build new trade agreements.
Parliament reject it, though.
Well, as I say, I think that's the problem, that you've got a Parliament made up of Remainers who it's not that they want this certain version of Brexit or that they're terribly concerned about Northern Ireland. They want to remain, and that's the problem.
Brexit was sold on British Parliament having sovereignty and control over laws and everything going forward.
Given permission by the British people.
I would have thought, as an ardent Brexiter, you'd be cheering that Parliament was shown.
Not at all, and that's been a total misconception. Most Brexiteers are extremely sceptical about the British political system. It's highly undemocratic, it's closeted, it's elitist, it's managerial.
It's undemocratic, the British parliamentary system is undemocratic. I mean, what parts of... I mean, we can't withdraw from everything, Ben.
So here's some ways that it's undemocratic. One way is that in the 2015 general election, the SNP got about 4 million votes. They got 60 odd MPs. UKIP got 4 million votes. They got 1 MP. So that's one way it's undemocratic. Another way that it's sort of an inside baseball point, but it's that and we've seen this with the recent Conservative leadership election, where you have a very, very small proportion of the country, and it is in fact the 320 odd MPs that really make the decision as to who's going to be Prime Minister, whittling it down to the final 2, and they're making a decision for 70 million people. Well, that doesn't seem right. You look at an American system where the president is elected by the people. And
so he got 2 million less than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, but it's on an electoral college basis, and it's a direct election. No one ever votes for a prime minister.
Only we could adopt a system more similar to the European Parliament, where MEPs are elected.
A referendum.
Well, where you have a Spitzenkandidat that you've got a choice of one candidate for president. No, I don't think that's
our MEPs.
A Democrat. Well, the MEPs don't make legislation. They're a revision chamber. The legislation flows from the Commission, which is unelected.
But they do so in consultation with the Council and the Council of Ministers. It's not just like this Commission.
Right, but that's not democracy, is it? Democracy is candidates are elected by the people, not that they're sort of chosen by this obscure process, and then there are these elites and people that just sort of seem to be self-appointed, and there's a selectorate.
Pure democracy is a referendum. That is pure. You can't get more democracy.
Right, and that's why there's this problem, because you had pure democracy with a referendum, and then it came up against a parliament which has all sorts of democratic deficits, and then it went to a European Union that has all sorts of more democratic deficits.